Have you ever wondered what lies hidden in the darkest corners of African history? Beyond the great empires, the gold, and the powerful kings, there existed rulers whose names were whispered with fear, kings who feasted not just on power, but on human flesh. This is the story of Africa's cannibal kings. Centuries ago, before colonial powers carved up the continent, Africa was home to countless kingdoms, each with its own traditions, beliefs, and rulers. Many were wise and just, guiding their people through war and peace. But some, deep in the heart of the continent, became infamous for something far more disturbing: cannibalism. The most terrifying tales came from Central Africa. In the Congo Basin, where dense forests swallowed the light, entire villages lived in fear of rulers who believed that eating human flesh gave them supernatural strength. To them, cannibalism was not madness, it was power. Among the most feared was King Sala of the Nganda people. European explorers who entered his kingdom in the 19th century wrote of rituals so horrifying that their words barely captured the terror. It was said that Nsala believed the heart of an enemy held courage and the liver contained wisdom. During raids, his warriors brought captives not just for slavery, but for feasts. Those chosen were sacrificed, their flesh cooked, and shared among the king and his warriors. Imagine the scene: drums beating in the night, fires lighting up the trees, victims bound and trembling as the king's priests painted their bodies with ash, the crowd chanting, and then silence followed by the unthinkable. But Nsala was not alone. In Uganda, the Kabaka king named Mwanga II shocked the world in the late 1800s. Known for his cruelty, Mwanga executed those who defied him in brutal fashion. Many accounts claim he dabbled in ritual practices that included eating parts of his enemies. His reign became a dark legend, remembered not just for tyranny, but for whispers of cannibal feasts inside the palace walls. Cannibalism was not always about hunger. In many kingdoms, it was tied to belief. The idea that consuming another human could transfer their spirit, their bravery, or even their life force. For these kings, it was about domination, body, and soul. To eat a man was to erase him completely. And then there was King Shaka Zulu. While Shaka himself is not remembered as a cannibal, stories spread by enemies and colonial writers sometimes accused him of ritual killings and feasts. Whether true or exaggerated, these tales built an image of African kings whose power was so absolute they could demand not only the life of their enemies, but even their flesh. By the mid-19th century, European explorers began recording these stories in their journals. Men like Henry Morton Stanley wrote of kingdoms where he claimed to see human remains after feasts, skulls stacked like trophies, and villages that trembled under rulers who thrived on fear. Were these accounts exaggerated to paint Africa as savage? Some historians believe so, but many local oral traditions confirm that cannibalism was real, at least among a handful of rulers. The most chilling stories came from the Congo Free State under King Leopold of Belgium. Although Leopold himself ruled from Europe, his African enforcers, the force public, terrorized villages. When locals resisted, soldiers were ordered to bring back proof of kills, sever hands. Sometimes soldiers turned to eating the flesh of their victims, turning terror into ritual. The line between survival, punishment, and ritual became blurred. By now, the legend of Africa's cannibal kings had spread far and wide. Some kings embraced the fear, others denied it, but for the people living under their rule, it was no legend. It was life. But power gained through fear never lasts forever. As the decades passed, whispers began to spread across neighboring lands. Traders carried tales of the bloodthirsty kings, and missionaries who dared to enter their territories never returned. Soon, Europeans who were advancing along the African coasts heard of these rulers. The stories shocked them, but also gave them an excuse to interfere. Meanwhile, inside the kingdoms themselves, the people grew weary. Imagine living in a land where every feast might turn into a death sentence. Imagine knowing that at night, drums could summon you not for celebration, but for sacrifice. Mothers hid their children, Warriors deserted their posts. Even loyal chiefs began to fear for their lives. The terror of the cannibal kings began to eat away at their own thrones. One ruler, who called himself King Bakongo, became infamous. His court was described as a place of horror. Skulls lined the palace gates, and the smell of burned flesh carried through the air. He believed that by eating the flesh of his enemies, he would live longer and never lose his strength. But his cruelty pushed his people to the edge. One stormy night, while the king prepared for yet another ritual, his own guards betrayed him. They dragged him from his throne and delivered him to the very people he had terrorized. The crowd did not hesitate. They ended his reign with the same brutality he had shown them. It was the beginning of the end for the cannibal kings. Across Africa, as kingdoms fell to new powers and outside influences, these horrific practices were slowly abandoned. Some kings were overthrown, others killed, and some simply faded into legend. But the memory did not die. To this day, the tales of the cannibal kings remain chilling reminders of what happens when rulers abandon humanity in their hunger for power. So, the question remains, were the cannibal kings truly stronger because of the blood they drank? Or were they only men consumed by their own madness? The truth may never be fully known. But one thing is certain, their legacy has left scars on history that can never be erased. And if you ever travel to those ancient lands, you may still hear the whispers carried on the wind, the whispers of kings who feasted on the living. Thank you for watching. If you found this story chilling and want to hear more forgotten and dark African histories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Dark Africa Files. Because here, we bring the shadows of the past back to life.